Hey, how's it going?
It's good, my man. It's good to see
Thanks for
you.
taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
it's been a long time coming. We've been trying to do this for a while,
It's
so
been at least 6 months. Yeah,
yeah,
here we are.
I love it.
We have to be ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. We are always ourselves, right? Our guest today has called Dubai home for the past 5 years, but his journey has taken him across over 7 countries and multiple continents, from South Africa to Kenya, Mozambique, Hungary, and even further. He's not just a world traveler, he's a tech powerhouse. With over 8 years of Google under his belt, he now leads AI and generative AI advisory practice for EMEA at Google Cloud. He loves all things technology and loves to help people transform the way they work and live. He started at Google. You've grown very, very quickly, and you've had a lot of successes and a lot of failures in that journey as well. And we're going to get into all of that. You've even cheated death a couple of times of some life experiences, and there was that mental component that played into that. I know you, and this has led you. I know you're very passionate about mental health, especially men's health. We're in a day and age where people are talking about mental health on one side of the equation, and we need to have both sides. I know you've overcome a lot of different adversity, so I just wanted to say thank you, welcome to the show, and thanks for being so vulnerable and open.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it. Yeah. Let's see how it goes. I'm
Yeah.
used to being on stage in front of hundreds of people, but that one-on-one where I get to talk about myself, it's daunting. But I'm excited. Let's see.
And
See
you can
how
talk
it
about
goes.
what you really want. Sometimes you have to, say
know,
what you need to say,
Do a little
etc.
dance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
Well, let's start with this. Who is Ed?
Great question. Where do I begin? I have a dream. No. So I was born in South Africa in the early 90s, son to a diplomat. My father worked for the South African government. My mom's English. We spent most of our childhood in Africa, living through the likes of Kenya, Mozambique, which is, post-Civil War, third world type of experience with a bit of a silver spoon. And then, through school, after Kenya and Mozambique, back and forth between South Africa, and ended up in Budapest in Hungary, where I did my high school for 4 years. Decided university was a good idea. I didn't want to go to university at first. I wanted to build my own computers and go and sell products to people on the streets, or just come up with, whatever ideas and take it
Parental
as it
pressure,
runs.
or
Exactly.
you just thought you convinced yourself of university was a good idea?
Pressure, and I also wasn't really great at school. Like, I wasn't an academic. I didn't really like the idea of textbooks deciding what I should do with my life. Now, this was I'm not saying to anyone, don't go to school. Definitely go to school and definitely go to college if you can. So I scraped through high school, managed to get in at university in Scotland, where I studied business management and marketing and technology, sports, bunch of business competitions. I found my confidence. I went through a lot of bullying, a lot of tough times in my childhood, whether it's the sort of private school in Africa where you learn to become a man, and a bit of toxic masculinity, but also toughness, lack of vulnerability, and genuine resilience versus toxic resilience, and those type of things. Fast forward to university, some of the toughest 4 years of my life, not necessarily hanging around with the right group of people, not doing things that I love, being a follower rather than doing my own thing and sort of finding my identity. I graduated from Scotland, and then my next step was to do a cycle trip from Edinburgh to London. So I found a bicycle.
Soul searching.
Soul searching. Didn't want to go to my graduation ball, none of that stuff. Started cycling, made my way. Well, found a bicycle online. 2 days before the trip, I got hit by a taxi.
Wonderful.
Which was amazing. All good. Everyone survived besides the bike. Got a new bike, and we went on this trip. And I said to myself, whatever I do, I'm not going to work in London. I'm not going to go and live in London. I've been in the UK long enough, in Scotland long enough. I need some good weather. So the next step was go on a cycle trip. On our way to Tampere in Finland with zero training. Anyway, got to London, ran out of cash, needed a job, got a job offer, took the job, moved to London. And that's how I ended up in London, working in a few jobs year in and year out, basic graduate roles, professional services, sales, advertising. And then Google came knocking out of the blue. I'll tell about that story later. Started it with Google in 2016 in cloud, selling productivity solutions to companies across Africa and the Middle East, Turkey, etc. And fast forward a few years, different roles, different managers, different jobs, found my identity, found my confidence, and the imposter syndrome very quickly became my superhero weapon, where I embraced it. And now I'm based in Dubai, a loving partner and a loving little puppy at home. having the time of my life.
I love that. You said that this imposter syndrome, a lot of people find this debilitating, right? They say, I have this imposter syndrome. I can't make a decision. I've experienced that in my personal life as well.
Hmm.
So you're in this moment. Was it just a switch for you, or was it something that you had to kind of really think through and say, like, hey, I'm going to use this to my advantage? Is it just a motivation? I'm not going to let this control me. How did you get?
I think fundamentally for me, it was stop thinking about the past.
Mm,
Like I also found this out way after I had addressed this imposter syndrome discussion that we read about online all the time. Affirmation, right? One of my love languages, which I discovered, is affirmation. And
you're looking really
I
good today.
realized, thanks, mate, appreciate it. I realized that affirmation actually has to come from yourself first before you can accept or enjoy the affirmation from others. So it was a long journey, a lot of mentors, a lot of guidance. Like the first three things that I looked at was, what's my support group like? And that's through friends, family, sometimes even acquaintances. 2, your work environment. Have you got people you can talk to or approach? And then the third one, the most important one, is yourself. And it sounds weird to have a conversation with yourself, but it's one of the things that I do on a regular basis. Now, not maybe when I'm in the car, on a bus, or in the public where it looks like I'm talking to myself, literally, but that sort of self-acknowledgement helped me
Self-talk,
build
yeah.
up and question and acknowledge, why am I here? Do I deserve to be here? And it took maybe a year and a half before the imposter syndrome, and I still get it from time to time where I look like, wow, this is what we do. This is what I do.
I think you definitely have a very unique background, as we've talked about a little bit just before this. I'm curious, for someone, like for me, I'm from California. I grew up in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
I lived most of my life there as home base, and I like to say that I've traveled a lot, but we're another step. Like, you've lived in different places. You've had formidable and big moments in your life in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
My question to you is the topic of, like, kind of success and failure. I've realized in my own life that the people that you're surrounded with kind of impact and tell you what success looks like, and you try to mimic this in your life in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
You've been in different parts of the world, and you've had these moments and these growing pains and different cultures, different experiences, what different people value and determine success and failures. How did you find yourself in this, and how do you define success? How do you define your failures?
Sure. I remove the staple definitions of success and failure.
Mm-hmm.
I think, first of all, all these countries, I've been to 25 of our offices globally. I've lost count of how many countries I've visited. Now, that can be a brag, but we also need to acknowledge that the opportunity cost of that is less deeper relationships. I've got friends who are very close with friends for the last 20, 25 years. For me personally, I've got friends all over the world, but those connections may not be as deep as others. And things can always be better, and things can always be worse. And the perspective and the exposure that you can have to the world, and when we think about success and failure, is perspective. The way we think, how we operate, how we shape opinions, all of those things for me are encompassed into not thinking through one lens. Right? For us, we can talk about unconscious bias. We can talk about one-lane thinking. For me, one thing I've learned in particular is to celebrate the event of other people's opinions. And, to your question about success and failure can be seen in many ways. It can be seen as making the wrong decision, having the wrong opinion, not achieving the goal that you set out, or that milestone, misunderstandings, lack of understanding. So when we think about culture and countries and experiences, it's taught me to really take on board not just different opinions, but park my opinion. What you think doesn't matter right now. Number one piece of feedback one of my early day mentors and managers at Google gave me was, adapt your communication style first rather than ask for people to understand you immediately through your way. So we bring that back to success and failure. I see conflict as a form of resolution. And success and failure doesn't need to be finite. For me personally, if I failed in achieving a certain goal, I then reverse engineer what happened. Like when I moved to Dubai.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved to Dubai, I was super overwhelmed. I had come out of a relationship. I had been through a very serious surgery. I had a loss in the family, and I was in uncharted territory. I didn't know many people here. It was the middle of summer, and it was super overwhelming, right? And I had to decide, what does success look like in the first 3 months? What I then did is I revisited that conversation with myself and said, what does success look like in day 1, day 3, day 7? And then we start thinking about the resources we have, the resources we don't have, and then we try and breed or evolve a mindset that says reactive or proactive.
So
Right? And these are the type of things where I take on board all these acquaintances and relationships and cultures and opinions and values and beliefs. Because where you're from doesn't dictate your identity. It definitely influences it. But if I take on board, the opinions of people from Germany, France, Italy, South America, South Africa, to then help decide what I'm committing to as an opinion or a decision, that can help drive success or failure. And then our definitions of success and failure evolve as a result of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So to tap into that, and you say, your failure can be a form of resolution, whatever it may be. Tell me about your biggest failure, and how did it shape you both professionally and personally?
So I made a whole list of things.
Okay.
And I wanted to read this part out because we 100% agree to absolutely no scripting. As I was reading through the types of questions you might ask, I was like, wow. Because I keep saying I love failure. And I do. I embrace it.
I mean, that's what these top performers, CEOs say. Like, you have to go through
For sure.
100 different failures to understand what not to do, so that when you do strike gold, you find that success, because you've gone through it. You've learned so much along the way.
Yeah, and 100%. And, you could call me hyper-performing or top 1% performer within my company over the last 8 years. Park that. Failure is human, right? It's human nature. So I'm going to go ahead and say it could be many things. Failing to be there for a partner when they needed you. Failing to get that promotion when you were promised one. Failing to get that personal best on your gym session, your run, or that marathon. Failing to get that grade you felt you deserved in school. Failing to get into that one university you really wanted to go to. Not hitting your quota. No, that one I actually never had a problem with. I always hit my quota. But everything else happened to me in real life, including getting negative feedback from a manager, a peer, or on a performance review or a customer. And those 32,000 job applications I went through when I was in London before Google, when I was in a very dark place. I was not happy, I was not healthy, I was not sleeping, I was not eating well. So all of these failures are examples of micro moments and macro moments, which we can mark down as failure. And it turns out that at least half of the ones I've just listed have helped me get to where I am today. It's helped me address something like, not being able to gain the weight I wanted to gain in the gym because I'm an ectomorph and my work is crazy busy. But that's over time become a pro for me. It's like I accept who I am, no matter how skinny or thin I was or how badly bullied I was as a kid because of who I am today, right? So that's been an empowerment.
It's kind of like that. Have you heard the Chinese proverb about the Chinese or the horse? It's like, oh, my horse ran away or my horse died. Oh, he's like, oh, that sounds so terrible. He's like, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Right.
The next day, something happened where they needed, like, everyone who had a horse was severely affected. So you saw the benefit of that. Oh, you saw your son come back home from after running away. You're like, oh, this is great. And the father's like, oh, I don't know. And the next day, the son says, I want my inheritance and you're not my father anymore. And so everyone says, oh no, what a bad son. He says, I don't know. And the next day is like, every day is a little bit different. You just never know what's going to happen, how it's going to shape you, right? So failure's in that space as well. It's amazing.
That story actually reminds me of the analogy of broken bones. When we talk about failure. Like, a lot of people don't know that. I don't think it's every bone in your body, but a lot of bones in your body. If you break something like your femur, and over time, the femur gets fixed. It heals. And it's been said that the bone itself is more stronger and more robust than before because the way it's healed and the way it's prepared. And the broken bone analogy is like if you're the broken bone, you need to seek professional guidance and expertise on how to properly fix that injured part of your body. And if you do it properly with the right help, the right guidance, the right support, you come out stronger than before. And the other thing to keep in mind is that these failures kind of often, and in my experience, definitely added to a lack of confidence. It added fuel to the fire, right? This imposter syndrome is one example. Self-confidence is another, not feeling attractive, whether it's to an employer, to a potential life partner, whatever. Those can transform into triggers, right? Emotional triggers. And the slippery slope there is to make sure that we address what those triggers are or are not. And then that has a direct impact on your ability to deal with stress and anxiety, whether it's meditating or cold plunge or sound healing. And there's different ways. I tried every way, and it didn't work until I went down a personal journey. And the point that I'm trying to say is that the openness to failure has helped me build a system or a framework on how to address the successes and the failures that happen at any point in time. And the other analogy I like to use that comes to mind is the potholes. As a guy who's spent most of his life in Africa, all the roads in Africa are not like Sheikh Zayed Road here in Dubai. Okay, there are big potholes, and sometimes you're not riding a really nice car. And each pothole, you can't see the potholes that are coming 100% of the time. You don't know how big or how deep they are. But if you're prepared for them and you pace yourself and you think about the left and the right and the brake and the accelerate, sometimes you have to go fast so that the car goes right over the pothole. And sometimes you can't avoid it and you just have to suck it up and bite the bullet, right?
Get ready for the jump.
Get ready for it. But you're in that steering wheel and you
Yeah.
control the speed and you control the left and the right. You can't control the road unless you go off that road, which is a whole nother conversation. But that's the analogy I would use to sort of speak to some of my biggest failures and how I contemplate the rights and the wrongs, remove the right and the wrong, and actually think of it as a moment in time.
You bring this up and it says like you sound just very self-aware, right? Like you've gone through it and you've thought about it. They say hindsight is 20/20, right? So you've thought about this and this is how I want to approach it moving forward. Let's take a step back.
Okay.
Let's go back to when you're still learning, you're in that learning phase, and it's because of your life experiences that you've been able to come to a point and have this self-realization. Take me back to a moment where stress definitely did overwhelm you. A lot of failures in life tend to cause stress, anxiety, like you mentioned. So take me to a place where you felt completely overwhelmed. And how did you either cope, compensate, and get through this kind of moment? And it can be as simple as, look,
Yeah.
like we were saying, didn't get the grade that I wanted, or I wanted a candy bar and my mom didn't buy me this, or, it could be
The
anything.
one that really stands out to me was London before Google.
Okay.
Um,
Like figuring it
I
out.
had, I was in a very bad job.
Okay.
I was being asked to do things that were not acceptable to do. I was in a place where I wasn't in a good co-worker environment. I wasn't learning. I wasn't growing. Compensation, it wasn't. I will not name people. I will not name companies. That's not what I do. So I left, and I only had 1 month's rent left in my bank account, and I had a little bit of debt to the point where I was going around and using contactless payment to get meal deals for £3, even though I didn't have the money in my bank account. So I was picking up an overdraft, but I couldn't afford food or drink. The overwhelming part is like if I hadn't, and I was running out of time, right? I'd paid that month's rent and I'd contacted my landlord saying, this is the last month, this is my situation. And I was severely overwhelmed because at the time, my partner and I had not worked out. I was alone. I was sick, not clinically depressed, but let's say I was heavy anxiety. The one thing I did do is I went to a gym across the road from my apartment in Canary Wharf. My apartment was like the Harry Potter cupboard, right? It was like literally you could touch wall to wall, and fits a bed and like a little tiny closet. And the one thing I did is I went and almost begged this very premium luxury gym that they give me a 50% cut on the membership for 1 month. because that's what I needed to keep myself going. I needed a place to put myself into, an environment surrounded with positive, motivated, healthy, physical people who were getting on with life, right? So while all this stuff was happening in the background, no one really realized what I was going through. And my friends at the time were in their own world, and I did not ask for help. I did not put my hand up and say, I am not okay. And if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have put myself in the mindset that one afternoon to reach out to a friend who worked at Google and say, hey, I think it's time, I'm ready for this conversation about my potential future at a company. He had no idea how in a difficult spot I was in. So I was kind of switching passion for desperation. And the long story short is he offered to refer me. 3 jobs, 1 shot, that was it. And I'd done the applications, and I was out with my friends and delaying because of a lack of confidence. Overwhelmed. I was thinking, I'm going to have to move back in with my parents. I'm going to have to get a job at a place where I don't want to be, doing things I don't want to do.
They say sometimes desperation leaves you, like, you know, you have no safety net, so
Yeah.
there's no failure at that point.
That is one of the many times I've been at rock bottom. But that one really stands out to me because of where I was with my mental health. And you could see it by looking into my eyes. Like, I looked exhausted, I looked tired, and I had nowhere to hold these interviews or do these meetings. And because of all these job applications coming back with rejection after rejection, I was in a place where I had lost all faith. Right now, it was the night we were supposed to hit submit on this referral, where I'd been through this CV 150,000 times. I was like, this is it. If this doesn't work, I'm in trouble. And I also had this, like, there's no way I'm going to get interviews at this amazing company back in 2015, 2016. And I delayed submitting the referral because I was distracted, let's just say. The next morning, he contacts me saying there's another role that's available. I looked at the role, and it was a eureka moment. I put on my favorite music. I put on my favorite suit in my apartment, blasted it, wrote down some gratitude thoughts, super cheesy, very fluffy. I'll admit it. It's very random.
Positive self-talk.
Get me in this sort of mindset. Made a phone call to him saying, yeah, let's pull the trigger on that one. So we pressed submit of the application, and within 1 week, rejection. But the third one that came up last minute, I got a call back. And then we went through the very long and strenuous process. 3 months later, I got the job offer, and my life changed forever. And it comes back to me putting myself, and I didn't realize it at the time, but that small little decision to get my body language, get the right attire on, and just visualize, manifest, law of attraction, and that gym spot and that cafe, and making sure I was slowly nourishing myself, even though I could barely afford pot noodles. That changed my life, man.
It's amazing to hear. I love that those moments in life where you feel like you're hitting rock bottom, or you're running into these issues where you feel like you almost have no choice to do certain things. They instill this aspect of like, hey, I'm never gonna let this happen again. If you've been given the opportunity or whatever it may be, you just like push yourself, and it's almost this great motivational factor that helps you elevate yourself to do what you need to do, or to have the conversation, or to reach out to the person that you want to reach out to. That you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't. Should I? Like, this person is way too successful. Why would they help me, etc. If you don't ask, you don't get. Right?
That's how we get burnout. If we don't take control, it doesn't mean having to ask for help all the time. You can ask yourself for help, right? So that's a real thing. Not addressing symptoms, and I'm a huge believer of preventative versus curative. Right? When I mentor, when I guide, when I advise, I'm not coming with some IKEA instructions on step 1 to happiness. No. I'm sharing experiences, my successes, my failures. I want to provoke thought. Like, if anyone ever asks me for help, I'm not going to give you the answers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some type of formula where the numbers don't add up, but it's going to help you go and find the solution.
Ask the right questions,
Yeah.
looking in a
Be
different frame of
thought-provoking.
mind.
But that's more preventative than curative. And I think if you do that early on, then it's less of solving a real-time problem, but rather avoiding a real-time problem. And then you start filling up the potholes, pausing, park the car, walk down the road for 2 kilometers, check where the potholes are, prepare for them, get ready for them, build up a mat like a NASCAR rally driver flying at 200 kilometers an hour, but you know exactly what turn where to take. And by the way, you're still going to make mistakes. But for me,
course.
preventative is way more healthier than curative.
So talking a little bit about that,
Sure.
just before you mentioned burnout, you talk about it, and people don't realize that they're getting burnt out in the moment, right? There's like, hey, I'm pushing, I want to impress my boss, I want that next level promotion, I want that kind of visibility in the company, whatever it may be, and they push and they push and they push, and then they burn out.
Yeah.
You talk about preventative versus curative. So many people don't have that sense of awareness, right?
Most people don't,
Exactly.
including me today.
So let's say I'm pushing myself, I'm thinking I'm doing everything that I know what to do, and I burn out. What is my next step?
Let's rewind to before the burnout phase for a second. You know, how we address stress versus how we deal with burnout, I think, are two different things,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I think about symptoms of burnout, for me, like the definition of burnout, I personally believe the definition of burnout has shifted fundamentally since the pandemic. Not to bring up the pandemic or COVID for the sake of it, but if we think about workaholics, right? Standard definitions will be things like for me, my symptoms were when I burnt out, and I've burnt out a few times. I'm not God. I'm not the sort of messiah of solution to burning out. That's for sure.
I feel like I burn out every weekend.
Lethargic behaviors, appetite malfunctions, digestion issues, sleep apnea, death scrolling on social media, procrastination. These are all things that I've been caught up in. And then anger and anxiety is another one. I'll even get sick, cold spots, the flu, and I get sick maybe once or twice a year. But when I get sick like that, it's either something I've caught from traveling, or I'm like, well, hold on, what's my body telling me? The biology piece, so important.
That's the thing. When I've experienced burnout, it's usually in those moments. My body is telling me that I am burnt out. Like I literally can't think straight. I have brain fog.
Yeah.
I am feeling lethargic. I love to play basketball. I want to play basketball every single day. And when I'm usually get done with work, I'm like, okay, eat something light, and then we go shoot some hoops.
Yeah.
But when you feel like you have burnout, you feel like you have no energy for it. You're like, oh, what's the point, or whatever it might be. Maybe it's it just feels better to like Netflix and chill, or whatever it may be. So I think listening to your body is huge in this moment. When you talk about like burnout, I think, and that's when you kind of have to have this self-identification component of preventative versus curative.
Yes, and I also think so. You don't wake up in the morning and go, "Oh, I burnt out yesterday."
Yeah.
It happens organically, right? So there's no calendar mark or invite that says you have burnt out, or a notification that pops up on your phone saying an internal storm has arrived. You're officially burnt out. I think three things that I check myself on when I'm in a super stressful environment, whether it's at work or other stuff, is biologically, what am I putting into my body that is helping me perform or is crippling me? Right? First one on the biology piece is I do regular checks on blood, urine, other things to make sure that all the stuff is where it needs to be, and to get feedback from professionals on nutrition, etc. And I've caught myself multiple times. You and I have spoken about this.
Yeah.
Where it's like, whoa, you look exhausted. It's like, yeah, I'm just super worked. Work is super stressful. It's really good work. I love my job, and I personally really enjoy doing what I'm doing. I have a great team, great manager. Shout out to everyone at Google, I guess.
The AI team.
But you don't catch yourself. Like you don't go and say, "Uh-oh, burnout," right? It's more like burnout is a result of a series of things. And ultimately, the second piece outside of biology is action and reaction, which is like, what can I control? What can I not control? Acknowledge it. Face on. Look in the mirror. Talk to yourself and say, what can I control? What can I not control? And you make that list out. T-bar on a piece of paper, pen, pencil, crayon, whatever you have. Write it out. Don't type it out. Write it out. And then that gives you perspective. And then the third one is look back on the last 3 months. Look back at your habits. Look back at your routines. Look back at activities. Look back at how you sleep. In the Circadian calendar sort of mindset, there's a sense of sleep. Like fundamentals for avoiding burnout or high stress or high anxiety environment are things like light and dark. Ironic, right? You need some darkness. Close those curtains, get away from your digital environment, get those 8 hours of sleep, drink loads of water. There's the nutrition, there's the physical piece. Like, so you're going back to your routine of the last 3 months and go and circle the things that you've done that are exciting, that are fun, that are energizing. And then with another color, go and circle something that has been a learning experience for you. And then ask yourself throughout those 3 months or month, whatever timeline you want to use, where you've spent time doing something you enjoy.
You know, it's interesting because it's like fine and dandy to say these things, like you just said. Look over the past 3 months. I'm not the type of person where I'm writing everything I do every single day. So if I go and like, what did I do last week? I can't tell you what I did 2 weeks ago. So that's not me. But I think, you know, when I think about burnout, the one thing that I feel, you like we were talking about, you feel your body changing, right? You feel something is changing and you're asking why, and it's very hard. I think that there's a lot of like there's a lot of technology we can use nowadays that help us track this stuff, whether
Right.
it's health bands, fitness bands, whatever they may, they track these things for you. And so it helps you kind of analyze and understand these kind of things for sleep, recovery, nutrition, like you were saying. And I think this is what I love about technology. There's using technology for good,
Yeah.
right? And I know everyone is saying there's because of, you know, singularity, AI, everything like this might come in, take your job, stressful. It's going to strain the world almost, doomsday, etc. That side, it almost seems as a negative. I like to see it as a positive. How can we help elevate ourselves to get to that kind of level and to say, hey, how can we become our optimum forms of ourselves or our best versions of ourselves with the use of this?
Yeah.
I think you have a combination of that, and the problem is like when you realize if you don't know what you don't know, right? So if I'm not a person and if I'm not tracking my data or whatever it may be, and I just notice I'm getting burnout and I don't have some log that's telling me what I've done the last 3 months that I can circle and identify myself, there's no problem asking. Like you can ask close friends. I mean, if you feel serious about it, you can ask professionals, and there's nothing wrong
So I
with
think
that.
there's something that you're touching on that is something I'm very passionate about.
Mm,
Something I've been trying to be better at,
tell
and
me.
something that I've tried to be an ambassador for over the last 10 years. And that's specific to men's health, and that's specific to being vulnerable and showing emotions. And I've been through so many schools of thought and so many different parts of the world where that is celebrated and that is not celebrated by masses or by individuals. And I can call that out and say that includes some of my closest friends. If I'm in an all adult, all male dominant room, we see that a lot less of when we're in a mixed room or if when you're just with your close friends.
True.
And it applies across all genders. It applies across everyone, especially in the next generation, the current generation and the next generation with Gen Z, is the idea of being emotionally available and emotionally vulnerable to have those conversations. And that's one of the number one misconceptions, is that you are weak by showing vulnerability. And one of the things I definitely wanted to say with Ernest is that that is a misconception. I've been down that route and it's complete fallacy. Being vulnerable is a massive strength, and it has guided me through my relationships with friends and families and my career. Now, there's a time and place where you need to also replace that with courage, and you need to have a stiff collar, and you need to give 120% and disagree and commit. Because by being vulnerable doesn't mean you're just going to get someone to come and give you all the answers, right? It's not by being vulnerable with Jane or John across the road that I met last week ago that they're going to guide me. No. We got to pick the right people. So if you are in a certain place, I always recommend seek professional help. But
And
don't be afraid to be vulnerable and be open.
it can be quick too, right? It's not a matter of like everyone thinks when you're asking for help, it needs to be this, oh, I need to do months and months of work. It can just be a 15, 20-minute conversation where someone gives you a little bit of perspective of how to look at a situation. And
Yeah.
it helps you
But also,
tremendously.
don't be someone that's not advice. It's more like opinions, right? These are my opinions. Take them as you wish. It's definitely not the IKEA manual I mentioned where it's step one, do this, step two. But for me, it's helped me meet new people and build very strong, healthy, long-term relationships. It's helped with credibility in the workplace. And vulnerable leads to learning, which leads to growth, which leads to experience, which turns failures into successes, where some of my biggest failures have become my biggest success or guided me off that main road with the potholes onto another road with different potholes. And it's great to have a passenger in that car with you, guiding you on that left or that right or that up or that down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
I know you also mentioned.
I'm having fun.
Yeah,
This
right?
is really cool. This is good.
We're getting deep into it. I
Yeah,
like
we
it.
are.
You had
I can tell a really bad joke if you want to add some humor at any point. You know me and my jokes.
Yeah, there was some slapstick humor that I wanted to say throughout, and I was like, maybe we shouldn't. We're trying to be professional here, right? Save it for off camera. There was a time where you said, look, you made a joke about it earlier, right? About never missed your quota, right? The pressure to succeed,
Right.
right? And the fear of failure motivates a whole bunch of people. Some people like it, some people don't. Some people succumb to the pressure, some people thrive in it. How do you manage this pressure in your personal life? And how do you not let it affect your well-being? Is it just a matter of being like, my mental health and my well-being is number one priority, so I'm going to put my foot down at work, even if it's my brand new manager who I'm trying to impress? Or how do you balance that?
That's a good one.
Thank you.
I think balance is the $1 million goal. Achieving balance in real time is often impossible. But with the right mindset, the right communication style, it can also be inevitable. So, short answer to this question, I think. 1, MRI, most respectful interpretation. In the workplace, I adopt a value and ethical mindset.
Here, I thought you were going to tell us to go to the
You just go to the hospital and do some
MRIs
scans. Yeah,
all of a
first thing you
sudden.
need to do is go to get yourself scanned. Most respectful interpretation. I automatically assume that whatever email, whatever chat, in the way that I input and output, whether it's receiving or sending, that there's the most respectful interpretation. The second one is I automatically need to remind myself every single time that for now, at least today, these are not robots that I'm working with. These are real human beings who are going on their own personal journey. And it turns out every one of us is a snowflake. We all go through similar issues and problems in different shapes and forms and sizes. So that acknowledgement puts me in a place where I can focus on how I communicate. I can be better at managing expectations. And a simple thing like blocking my calendar for a forced 20-minute lunch where no one can book time and that is my lunchtime. No one disturbs my lunchtime. Or Fridays is a no meeting day. Message me if it's urgent. Finding time for my partner. You know, we sit down and we say, this week at this time, at this night, it's date night. Or Mondays is for basketball. Or Wednesdays
non-negotiables,
is for golf. And clearly I only work 3 hours a week the way I'm talking. If my manager's watching this, she's why he's playing basketball, he's playing golf, right? But you get my point, right? So now that I've given you sort of the high level lens, the second part of the short answer that I think is more important is managing expectations. Everything I do and how I spend my time, I want to always be checking myself in terms of the type of work I'm doing. Is it relevant? Is it helpful? Am I learning? The relevant and the helpful part is it mapped to my objectives and key results? The second part is it mapped to our mission and our vision as a company? And that trickles all the way down to my core role and my core function. And then when I'm meeting with customers and we're getting through conflict and we're going through this constructive tension, I know it's a means to an end. Because what we do is a collaboration when we work with our clients. There's no pushing of agendas, right? I absolutely want to force this down your throat. It's more of, I really believe in these products and these solutions, and I want to work with you on quantifying what this is going to bring to your table. So if I get stuck in that part of the world, and I'm spending 80% of my time working like mad, 12-hour sessions, staring at a computer, not drinking, not eating, not spending time with my dog or my partner or my friends, that puts me in a very bad situation, right? So it's not advice or guidance. It's more of the action to the balance piece at the beginning. How to make it inevitable is to have those conversations internally and with your partners. What does routine look like? And how does going with the flow look like? And then what are the check-in points with your partner and with your friends and with your management and your leadership and yourself to be like, my happiness meter, today it's a 4. Tomorrow it's a 5. Or yesterday it was a 2. And then you put all those personal variables and value indicators together to make a decision on, okay, how am I feeling today? And remember the stuff I mentioned about biology and sleep and
Mm-hmm.
dark and physical and go for that 30-minute walk? All of that is part of the formula to the inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I would frame my approach to finding balance. And a closing thought, and I've known you for a while now, you've got to make those mistakes. Like, you've got to have days and weeks where you're overworked, or you've got to have days and weeks where you're just not motivated because you stopped learning. And how you have those conversations in a workplace is very sensitive,
Exactly. Yeah.
but your employer's role is to give you the resources you need to succeed, and your job is to take control of your career and your personal development, and that includes your personal health. Because at the end of the day, family, there's nothing, and your health, there's nothing more important than that. Nothing
Exactly.
else really matters.
To end with, we talked about all these things about stress, anxiety, high pressure situations.
Mhm.
We're talking about high performers and how to do this balance, etc. From there, the key that I'm learning a lot from you, and the main thing that I'm hearing, is about having this ability of self-awareness, right? Everything that you're saying here is, if you're not able to take that time to understand it about yourself, have the talks that you're saying, to think about your past and analyze it, whatever it may be, without that, you're not able to do any of these other things. So whether you're doing multi-million-dollar deals like yourself, or you're just trying to understand you can't deal with the pressure of your school workload, what is that first step for someone who's not self-aware, that is struggling with this? What is that first step that they can do in their daily lives that will help them on their journey to become more self-aware?
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Okay.
Acknowledge the fear. Acknowledge the discomfort. Call it out to yourself. What am I afraid of? Why am I afraid of it? And then spend 15 minutes, half an hour, taking those fears on writing 3 things. What is the worst 3 things that could happen as a result of this fear? And then what are the best 3 things that could happen as a result of that fear or that uncomfort? And when it comes to self-awareness, you can write down things like your strengths and weaknesses, whether it's people skills, mathematics, accounting, finances, creativity, art, photography, whatever, right? Your superpowers. The second activity is your superpowers. The third and final thing is write down the resources that you have and the resources you think you should have in order to address those outcomes from that fear on the best and the worst that could happen. Be open-minded. Drop the arrogance. Because, and there's a kid's analogy, is that when you take a kid's arrogance and the complexity away, they're usually left with a carving block. And then you can start carving your little masterpiece, which is that self-awareness piece. And then the final piece, I would say, which I'm extremely passionate about, is reverse engineer those outcomes back to where you are today. And what you find is when you take a step back and you align superpowers with fears and the worst case and the best case, you reach a full circle on a plan. And Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson, one of the most amazing comedians in the world, he said that when you look at something super zoomed in as a tragedy, and then you zoom all the way out and you look back up from 50,000 or 100,000 feet, you can find comedy. And that's where we hear the simple analogy of, is it really going to matter 5 years from now? So be afraid, be very afraid. It's going to be okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time, man.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.